see Tunua yet.
Yeah.
And Angela, for time's sake, if we get in the time crunch, I've kind of figured out how to zoom through a couple of the slides. And are we emailing this to people?
Yes.
Okay.
So as
Good.
after the
Okay.
the session, so I think tomorrow folks will be receiving a copy of the presentation, as well as a link to an evaluation survey, and the video. So we're posting the video as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers my question.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. So Mark, let me know when you'd like us to start.
Okay. You want to give a few more minutes, or because I can't see if anyone else has joined besides you all.
Okay. Yes, it looks like we have 22 attendees on the line.
Okay.
And
all right, we might as well get going.
Okay. Okay, I think we're still, I don't see Tunua on the line though.
Okay.
Unless she's joining, maybe she joined as an attendee. Okay. Okay, so we'll get started in the meantime, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to CRCD's first Permanent Supportive Housing Roundtable series. We are so excited that you're joining us today. This series was made possible with the generous support of CSH, and I see Saba on the line, and thank you so much, CSH, for your support of this endeavor. Mark, will you take us to the next slide, please?
Sorry.
All good. My name is Angela Labou, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer with CRCD. The goals of this series are to explore the historic and current landscape that compels affordable housing to be a platform for neighborhood-based community development that truly addresses the impact of systemic inequality in our community. The second goal is actually to share CRCD's experiences and lessons learned developing affordable and permanent supportive housing in South LA. And we will have some sessions that specifically focus on that. As I mentioned, this is the first of what will be quarterly convenings. We're excited that our panelists today, and I won't steal anyone's thunder, so I'll let Mark, take that away in a minute. They're going to be setting the stage, so they're going to be, talking more about, the context in which and the history in which our neighborhood, our community finds itself that compels housing as a platform for neighborhood-based community development. So once we kind of set that stage, in February, we'll be talking about the key partnerships that make, these kinds of developments happen. In May, we'll talk about what housing really looks like with community benefits, and we're excited to be able to share some of our own experiences and developments where we've done this. In August, we'll actually focus specifically on PSH for transition age youth. This is a specialty area for CRCD, and we're excited to share with our partners what during that convening. And then finally in November, we'll be talking about partnering with the community and what does that really mean within a permanent supportive housing or affordable housing development. What does community partnership really look like? So we hope that you'll join us for those sessions as they come along. Throughout today's session, please feel free to ask questions in the chat box and the Q&A feature. Lisa Winkle, our marketing communications manager, and I are monitoring the chat box and the Q&A feature for questions to share with panelists throughout the discussion today. So to get us started with, to kind of share more about who we are, CRCD, who we are and what we do, I'll be transitioning us to a little bit of a video, and then Mark, and after the video, Mark will be taking over to reveal the rest of this wonderful convening that we have prepared for you. So just give me a moment and I'm gonna share this video.
My name is Mark Wilson. I am the president and CEO for the Coalition for Responsible Community Development, and we started this organization in 2005 with a mission to change lives and build neighborhoods responsibly here in the Vernon Central community of South Los Angeles. When CRCD first started, 3/4 of the community was between the ages of 18 and 24 years old. Young people were also the most at risk of homelessness, not completing high school, and definitely the most at risk of not seeking gainful employment. We felt that if we were able to lift and empower that population, then the community would change as well. So we started with our flagship program, Youth Build. It's an educational and job training program that's tied to construction. So young people come seeking a high school diploma, sometime wanting a job, and we recruit them into a program that provides both of those services.
Let's knock the rest of this off, and let's get ready to frame it up, boys.
So today we're working on a workbench. We're gonna put the base on, put the legs on, and then put it all together.
Make me proud, Andrew, and do some cuts.
Plumbing, carpentry, electrical, all of these trades can lead to family sustaining wages, which is ultimately what we all want for them.
My favorite thing is working together with my trainer and other people I work with. After I finish this program, I want to use my skills in the real world, build houses, and go to trade school and take some classes.
We also do civic engagement work. We provide young people with opportunities to volunteer, to do cleanups, to plant trees, whatever service project that they think of as civic leaders, they do through AmeriCorps.
Well, today we're just passing out the food for those people around the neighborhood that need food. So we bag up everything like cans, vegetables, produce, bread, milk, and we give it to the people.
CRCD Academy is one of our highlighted programs because it's a charter high school that's targeted towards young people who, for whatever reason, did not complete high school.
My name is Elijah Reed, and I'm graduating with my high school diploma.
This means change for me. It gives me hope. I got something different coming my way.
Through our project-based learning, we get to see the fruits of our labor, of when a young person came through the door seeking an opportunity for change, and they walk across the stage. It's a magical moment at CRCD.
I've never had that type of support in my life, you know. Anything I needed, they were an excellent resource. Now I have a real need to go to school and get my education higher so I can live a better life.
Y yo sé que esta es una educación buena para mí, para mis hijos el día de mañana. So
CRCD's Workforce Development Department works with the most vulnerable population between 18 and up. They come through our doors, they receive support from career coaches and case managers. They are provided with wraparound support. So if they need coaching on how to fill out a resume, if they need to dress for an interview, transportation assistance, anything that they need that can help them, they can get from the WorkSource Center.
I come to the WorkSource Center through CRCD just so I can continue to be a part of the program, be a part of the services, take advantage of the services. Things could go left for me, so I always need to make sure I'm in the good graces of these programs.
If I had to pick a couple highlights of CRCD on the real estate development side, it was our ability to partner with reputable developers to preserve the historic monuments in the community and to adaptively reuse them for affordable housing. Not only did we secure properties like the historic Dunbar Hotel, where we were able to assist in bringing in a full-service restaurant, but we also was able to secure the historic 28th Street YMCA. We have been able to secure more than 315 units of housing. And today we now have more than 1,000 units in the pipeline. I'm very proud of the work that we've done for not only adults, but for young people and amongst the most vulnerable populations in South Los Angeles.
Right. So hello, everyone. Thank you, Angela and Lisa, for the video. Every time I see that video, I get a little choke in my throat because, you know, the magnitude of the work that we do, you know, when you're in the weeds of doing this work, you don't get an opportunity to step back and see the work and the impact. And so watching those videos that you all put together is very impactful to me. So thank you guys for that. Welcome everyone again. My name is Mark Wilson, President and CEO of the Coalition for Responsible Community Development. I'm going to try to get through my part fairly quickly here in respecting time, but more so because we have some dynamic speakers that are joining us today. Tunua Thrash-Ntuk, the Executive Director with the Local Initiative Support Corporation of Los Angeles, and Karen Mack, the Executive Director with LA Commons. I will not steal their thunder. They will have an opportunity after my short presentation to introduce themselves, but I just want to publicly thank them for participating as panelists and sharing the impact that you all are having, not only in South Los Angeles, but throughout the city of Los Angeles. So thank you for allowing me to share the space with you all. So I wanted to touch a bit, the video touched a little bit, but just want to touch a bit on the history and how we got here and why the importance of permanent supportive housing is a priority for CRCD, and why the Vernon Central community was of importance to our agency from inception. So as you can read through this timeline, thank you again to Angela and the team for helping to put all of this together. But Vernon Central is one of the more historic communities in Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles. It was one of the more original cities in Los Angeles. So, you know, Vernon Central, you know, in the 20s was a thriving community. A lot of people may not know or may have forgotten, but it was where the Goodyear Tire Company was. It was where General Electric was. It was where these thriving large corporations were. And a lot of people that lived in and around that community benefited from those jobs. And the predominant community at that time were African Americans. And because of restricted covenants, And for those that may not know, restrictive covenants existed even in Los Angeles, where if you were a person of color, particularly African American, you could not live outside the boundaries of what was designated. And that designation was the Vernon Central community. So whether you're a performer, whether you were a doctor, a dentist, a business owner, an attorney, you lived in the Vernon Central community because you were restricted from living anywhere else. Redlining and all of these restrictions impacted the community. So going down this timeline, in the 1940s or 50s, you had what we call globalization, and many of us are looking at the news and probably seeing a lot of that today, where companies were given authority pretty much to source their products in other countries and move their businesses in other countries. And so went the businesses in the Vernon Central community. So the businesses that once provided family sustaining wages to many African American families were now uprooted and left the area. The Goodyear track I talk about a lot because many of you may know the large post office that sits on the corner of Florence and Central Avenue. That's in fact where the Goodyear Tire Company was back in those days. And so if you fast forward through this timeline and you look at the redlining that existed for, limiting homeowners' ability to access, home ownership, and then you move into, because of those disparities and lack of employment, you moved into the 1965 uprising. Moving forward, another 20 or so, almost 20, about 30 years or so forward, you have the Rodney King uprising, or Rodney King protests that led to the 1992 civil unrest. And so in between the 1920s and the 1990s, you saw a sharp decline in the neighborhood that has led to groups like CRCD and others participating in opportunities to bring more resources to the community to uplift the community, but also to improve access to home ownership and affordable housing. This slide here, and sorry if I'm gonna try to speed up a little bit, but you can see the decline over the years from when there was this bustling community in the 20s, and then the sharp decline in manufacturing employment from the 20s to the 2000s, because these centers, these job centers, which was very large, between the 70s and 80s began to close. And so there was a sharp decline in wealth in the community, but also a sharp decline in employment in the community. And when we talk about employment that was or allowed families to sustain themselves. A lot of that went away and moved out the country or in other areas outside of the community. When you have a decline in wealth, you experience a decline in unemployment. You also experience a decline in education. So if you combine those two, for Vernon Central, losing those opportunities in the 70s or in the 30s, 40s, or really started in the 50s through the 70s, you started to see a sharp decline, as you can see here, in educational attainment. That went from 73% of folks graduating with a high school diploma to now 58%. And that number may even be lower today. And you can see the sharp unemployment rate in our community, which is almost double than any other community in the county of Los Angeles. Moving forward to the opportunities, we find ourselves in a unique place to where we have participated in bringing affordable housing dollars to support low-income communities in Vernon Central and in South Los Angeles. As you can see from this slide, there's a total of $42 million in committed funding. for South Los Angeles. You may not know these projects exist, and these slides will come your way. But you know, there's projects in the community that are being built and that CRCD is actually building. This actual slide here actually shows all of the dots here are projects that CRCD either has active or in development or either in the pipeline, which represents over 1,000 units of affordable housing. And we're doing affordable housing intentionally as a place where folks can sustain themselves and move into actual other services that helps build family wealth. As you can see, the current demographics in the area, African Americans now today represent 8.3% of the population. And there are more than 80% or over 85%, I believe, are Latinos in our demographic area. This is the income and housing facts, just so you all know. The average median rent in our area, which is why we develop affordable housing, is almost $1,100 in our area. And the average median income is around $36,000 for a family of 4 or below. And 54% of the households in our area are at or below 100% of the federal poverty level. And these are why these demographics demonstrate why we do the work that we do. Income and housing facts, 68% of South Los Angeles households are experiencing rent burden. That's a high number. Just if you can fathom that, that's 68, almost 70% of the households, which is the greater majority, are experiencing rent burden. In service provider area 6 in the county, based on the last homeless count from LISC in 2020, there are more than 13,000 residents, persons, that are on our streets, that are houseless. And this is why we do our work, because it's up 36% from last year. 36% from last year, it is up. And so you factor those two, almost 70% experiencing rent burden, and 13,000 or over 13,000 folks are on our streets, which speaks to not only why we do our work, but why we are encouraging others to build more affordable housing. And this is some more historic facts for people to understand that while the population of African Americans or Black people is low, the amount of African Americans are up 40%, not up 40%, but represents 40% of the homeless population in the county. So again, that number is 9% of the population, 40% of the population of our homeless residents. And so don't want to leave you with those disappointing statistics, but it's important that we understand the facts of what's happening in South Los Angeles, particularly the Vernon Central community of South Los Angeles, which sometimes get forgotten. And it also is forgotten that there are groups like CRCD that are doing great work in the community to change these numbers to what they were in the past. We want to see a bustling community. We want to see community families earning wages that sustain themselves. And this is why CRCD does this work as a place-based community development corporation that's not only looking to just develop housing, but also to improve and develop community. So with that said, I know I went over time. I know Angela and Lisa's like, Mark, but I just wanted to kind of, and I hate to have zip through the historical perspective because we could have went on forever on that, but just wanted to bring into context of where the community was, some events that led to where we are. And so people really understand that this is not new. We're not, CRCD has been around for 15 years. The issues is not 15 years old. The issues date back decades that started back in the 40s. So we're dealing with decades of issues that the community has dealt with and trying to, in a rapid pace, change that. And the only way we can change that is in partnership. And so in partnership with this presentation, I see Karen. So if you don't mind, Karen, if I point you out first to introduce yourself, talk about the work that you're doing in South Los Angeles, and Karen and Tunua represents the whole notion and mission behind CRCD and why partnerships are important. And the whole reason that we're doing this series, thanks to Corporation for Supportive Housing, is that it's recognized that we can't do this work alone. You saw the decades of flight, and folks like Karen and Tunua help us to move that work forward, along with many others. But I'm so excited, Karen, that you've allowed me to share the stage with you. So I will now turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. And it's really my pleasure to be here with such dynamic, some of my most dynamic colleagues in Los Angeles. Both Mark and Tunua are just awesome leaders in terms of, addressing the tremendous challenges that we have in our work to develop communities like South Los Angeles. I loved looking at your timeline and, sort of seeing my life really laid out there in that my parents, both of them actually were part of the Great Migration. My dad moved here from Oklahoma, started working in the Douglas aircraft plant. So, this whole area of the South and South Bay were dotted with factories at one time. And he was able to buy a house on the GI Bill. And I was thinking, God, we need something like the GI Bill, right now that would pave the way for people to get into home ownership. And then he met my mom at Douglas Aircraft, and then they got married. So I grew up in Compton, actually worked at what is now Ted Watkins Park as a lifeguard when I was, in my teens. And so really had a strong grounding in this community. And my parents still live in the same house. So I'm in their 90s and I am over there frequently. So this area and and they actually live on Central, off of Central and El Segundo. So, that Central corridor has played a really important role in my life. So I say that not just because, physically that it was important, but also just spiritually, seeing the challenges, being a lifeguard, seeing the young people who came to the pool and just the challenges in their life, I think really influenced me in terms of my work, particularly the work that I do today and starting LA Commons and really wanting to use art and culture as a tool for community self-determination, really. I mean, that I think is the power of our work. And I was actually can I share my screen and show you all some of our work? Let me see if I can do it.
If not, maybe Angela.
I think Lisa can actually change that setting for you.
Yeah, you should be able to now. Try again.
Yeah, okay. I'm just looking for what I wanted to share. Oh, here, oh, just share, I guess. And that's not what I want to share. Oh, this is the one. So that is one of our most recent works, which is called Heart of Hyde Park. And we did this project with the Hyde Park community. It's sited at Slauson and Crenshaw. And what I want to do is, oh, there's the thing. Oh, I don't want to show you my husband. Let's see if I can find that other image. Well, I'm not gonna belabor this, but you get the idea that we're really showcasing the community. I mean, this is a really prime example of, you know, the community being reflected in the projects that we do, not only in the people that are featured in this project but also you see the Adinkra symbols, which are so relevant to the African American community coming from Ghana and really speaking to the folks that we work with. And, you know, our idea is really about, you know, creating this foundation for self-determination, really giving people a voice. And what this artwork does is a source of connection and pride and a foundation for community building. And, you know, Mark talked about young people as being a really important constituency in South Los Angeles, and that goes for us as well. And as a matter of fact, I heard so much that was relevant in relationship to our work in Mark's presentation in terms of really wanting to just wanting to stop here. You know, activate young people, because we really feel like young people and their energy and vision is they you know, bring us such an opportunity for us if we provide them with a foundation to lead. And so that is a big part of what we do, and they are so activated by these art projects. And you know, and they activate their elders to want to be involved and to partner with them to make a difference in their communities. And you know, through this creative placemaking work that we do, or placekeeping, I should say, you know, I've been given lots of opportunities. And one of the things that is important in this conversation is that I'm on the City Planning Commission. So that really provides me with a platform to, you know, advocate for the very issues that we are talking about. Just this morning, we had a presentation on the housing issues in Los Angeles, and we all know how dire it is, you know, looking at Mark's data, but really thinking about what the impacts of this current reality are going to be on those numbers, you know, in terms of making things even worse, because you know, the impacts of COVID have largely been the negative impacts. I mean, not to mention all the deaths, but in terms of people losing jobs and, you know, just having their economic lives impacted, have largely been in Black and Brown communities. And so, you know, I imagine those numbers are going to get worse before they get better. And so, you know, I am really hoping, I mean, well, let me just say, I'm so thrilled, you know, because on the Planning Commission, what I see is like, you know, creating affordable housing is one of the hardest things we can do, you know, in terms of the cost and just the bureaucratic barriers to actually get one affordable housing project done. And to think that CRCD has 1,000 units in production is extraordinary. So, you know, I'm excited to have this conversation to really just talk about what the issues are and lay the foundation for your conversations going forward.
Thank you very much, Karen. I do like that artwork behind you as well.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and you all know that we are definitely fans of young people and youth empowerment. So thank you for that. Now I want to introduce the folks online to Tunua, Thrash-Ntuk. And I want to set the stage by saying that the reason that we have affordable housing in production is because of the partnership we have with Tunua and the Local Initiative Support Corporation nationally, but also in LA. And because of the leadership that Tunua has brought it to the Los Angeles office, and particularly in South Los Angeles, it allowed us to not only access resources to develop the housing and the pipeline that I shared with you all, as far as loans and patient capital and so forth. But Tunua's leadership has also invested in our team by supporting us with grants to bring on staff, both in our real estate department, but also in our financial opportunity center. And she's just been a great partner and moving South Los Angeles to where it deserves to be. So just want to give you that little introduction to Tunua. And I forgot to mention that I also grew up in South Los Angeles, not too far from Tunua, and Karen. And so I will now pass it over to my friend Tunua.
Thanks, Mark. It is such a pleasure to share space with you and with Karen. I too consider the two of you wonderful assets and jewels of the greater Los Angeles community. And it's great to be in company with you today. So yes, Mark, the wonderful thing about the introduction that you gave is that there are lots of things people could read about me, right? And read about my background and my bio and things that I've crafted. But I appreciate that you've walked through the things that we've done together to create a better place in South Central Los Angeles, where I grew up, where you grew up. And Karen, I did spend a bit of my childhood on School Street in Compton. So that is also part of sort of the greater South LA community. As was stated, I'm the executive director for LISC Los Angeles. And as I come to this conversation, you heard a bit about the fact that, we are, folks who grew up in these neighborhoods, right? And so I recently authored a op-ed that was picked up by Next City, where I was talking about the Watts Rebellion of '65, and my mother being in the neighborhood at that time. Then fast forward to 1992, here I was, a student. I was in high school at the time. And I'm sitting on my, front porch in the very same neighborhood that my mother sort of experienced the Watts Rebellion in. And in 92, it was, we needed to make progress. We, wanted to be able to see a different kind of economic life, social life, even a different life with local law enforcement. And then we get to 2020, and I've got a teenage daughter who's been watching sort of not just the Los Angeles community, but really all over the country, very much, erupt into another sort of unrest and conversation about why are we still here and what's next. And I think that is important in the sense that what I talked about and what I think is critical, and you have pulled out all of those things right now, Mark, is that when my mother was in that position, she had not necessarily made it to college. Like, she and my grandmother were folks who were working for the Los Angeles Unified School District. My grandmother was a janitor. And by the time you got to 92, you've inspired, sort of that next generation, which was me, to say, hey, I want to do something about changing the direction of my community. And so we are all sort of maybe part of that generation. And then you get to 2020, and we are founding organizations already, having had 20 years experience in industry, having the education that maybe our parents and grandparents didn't have, understanding how systems work. And so I come to this moment, I know that those were some stark statistics about where we are as a community and where we are as a people, but I am that much more encouraged by the fact that we have even more people who are and have committed their lives to making sure that there is a different and better outcome. And the work that CRCD has done is part of that. Karen, the work that you've done in lifting up arts and economic development is part of that. And at LISC, we've been helping to lead a conversation around South Los Angeles and making sure that we are laserly focused on continuing to lift up organizations that are already there doing great work, but could use more resources. You know, frankly, we've got to get more resources from even outside of our community in order to make that difference, and focus on making sure that we are looking at our small businesses who are under attack right now because of the economic crisis, looking at real meaningful employment opportunities in non-traditional sectors, meaning let's get connected into what's happening in the region. Let's get connected into entertainment and arts and all the things that make Los Angeles great. And then 3, to the, really focusing in on making our neighborhoods. I know, Karen, you're very involved in Destination Crenshaw. That's a district where we can build a lot of momentum in South LA. We even have the Goodyear tract in South LA that already boasts more than 1,000 jobs. These are districts where we can really focus on building those up so that we have jobs right in our communities that we can walk to, that we can engage with, and use our place as the biggest asset. So, for now, I'm happy to see if there are any other questions that we want to get into. This work, we know, must be undergirded with an absolute focus on making sure we house everybody. Part of where I've been most of my morning today is on the board of directors with Housing California, and talking about what we're going to be rolling out in 2021, which is the Housing Roadmap Home. And that's an opportunity to just look at housing everybody, and we need to go bold with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you both, Karen and Tunua. I think what you both demonstrated that I've always argued for is that South LA does have capacity. They just need that investment in that capacity. And what you both have done is put truth to your words and action to your words, in investing and continuing to invest in the capacity in South Los Angeles. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Angela to see if there's any questions that folks have for this wonderful panel, or any other conversations that anyone wants to extend.
Well, I thought it was funny that Tunua, my parents worked for the school district too. That was such a, it's so interesting how, that path, an where the opportunities were, at that time. And,
it's still an important pathway, right?
Yeah, true.
What that says is that, I mean, for my family, my mother worked for the school district, my grandmother worked for the city, but she was a janitor. And before that, she cleaned homes, but working for the city, she got union benefits, she got steady pay.
Exactly.
And these are still really important pathways into the middle class for Black people.
Yes,
and have to, I really appreciate the work that Council Member Harris Dawson is doing by looking at, of all the thousands of jobs that are within the city of Los Angeles, how many go to South LA residents?
Yes, I didn't realize he was doing that. That is excellent. Yeah.
That's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. In addition to all the other paths, and that really is our challenge. And when we think about, our work and really trying to bridge these young people with the creative economy, for example, which is so important in Los Angeles, given what that industry and, the many jobs that are there, and, high paying jobs actually. So that is our challenge, is to bridge South LA with those jobs.
And that was one of the dreams of the work that I was doing. So Mark, along with a series of other folks, especially those who've been working in economic development, we brought together in South LA to look at and think about those pathways. And what we're seeing is that a lot of young people, because they're, playing games online now, are just much more adept with and comfort with the growing industry of sort of how do you design these video games? What are the interfaces that people need to have now? And how is that connected even to the sports world, both in real life as well as online? And so that's an area where we'd love to see some greater connections, because those are great jobs and it's a great career.
Right. No, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, so we haven't seen any questions come up in the chat box. However, I think, from, I'm just going to draw from some of the questions that we kind of pre-prepared. Just if the panelists would kind of reflect on kind of the data that was shared, but maybe being able to drill down more into the impact to Black and Brown communities or Black and Brown residents through kind of the different socioeconomic kind of impacts and touchstones that happened, and kind of what we're seeing now.
Go Tunua.
Well, I was going to say we could go a couple of different ways. So I'll do highlights under the two areas where we are really spending a lot of time right now. So there's, on the one hand, I'll put economic development and small business together. And then on the other hand, I'll put housing and housing security on the other side. So South LA in particular, some of you may know that we as LISC were very involved in getting PPP loans out to small businesses. And
great job. You guys
I know.
did a yeoman's job. That was amazing.
Well, we couldn't get in round one because all the big banks took all of the money in the air. And we know that they did not get many of those dollars to our businesses, but we were able to, in round two, to be able to get out there and get, some loans. And we were doing the small ones, 10,000, 5,000.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of the other institutions didn't want to do that. But the things that we learned were that our businesses weren't really incorporated. People were just in business, but they hadn't incorporated.
Yeah.
And in order to access these resources, you needed to have a level of incorporation. It would have been best if you had a business banking account. It would have been best if you had been filing your tax returns. And, it would be great if you had some financial statements in place. And so for our businesses nationally, we know Black businesses, 96% of them have one or less employees. So the disadvantage was the system was set up so that you had to have employees. You had more employees, you get more money and you get to multiply higher. And you had to have your data in place. And if you didn't have those things sort of in place, you missed out on that sort of set of cash. And so that's something that we have to really look at and focus on in terms of making sure that our businesses that are brick and mortar, as well as those that are inside of our homes, are going to be able to weather the next storm by being ready in that way, and then being ready to be fully digital. So then I'll just mention quickly the issue of housing. And you probably have gone through it, Mark. This crowd is well aware of how hard it is to have 3.5 jobs as one human being in this economy so that you can barely have enough money to put a roof over your head. It just physically is just not possible to do. And so, the vast majority of Black people, Black women are rent burdened. They're paying 30, 50% or more of their income on housing. But I'll just speak about a recent study that is very important to South LA. UCLA just did a study that shows that during the last recession or Great Recession, there was almost a run on properties in South Los Angeles, where there were LLC transactions over and over again, 1,000% in terms of turnover of property that went into not the hands of everyday families, but into LLCs.
Right.
And what that tells us is that Black and Brown communities, South Central physically in particular, is a very vulnerable community during moments of recession like this. And it's really critical that our elected officials and our policies are set in such a way that they support these communities, because these are the very same communities that have been hardest hit by COVID and don't have the jobs and the resources to maintain the rent, and are on their way to pathways towards homelessness. So there's work to be done to try and disrupt that.
So I, sort of thinking about you two and, this need for affordable housing when we've got, just 13,000 homeless people in South LA, not to mention the 40,000 in the city and the 60,000 in the county. How do we get more affordable production housing online? Can we multiply CRCD so that, we've got multiple organizations, operating at the high level that CRCD is? I mean, because it's really, when I'm sitting in those commission meetings and, with every development, there are like 3 affordable housing units, and of course there are total affordable housing units in the mix, but it's very, it's a drop in the bucket often in terms of what we need.
Hey, Karen, that's an excellent question. And I think that work that Tunua is doing, and there are other organizations that are putting affordable housing into development. And because of the advocacy work that's happening with groups like you all, putting pressure on for-profit developers to include affordable units in their developments as well. And for CRCD, we're applying pressure to our affordable housing development friends to include units for homeless youth, because homeless youth sometimes, or a lot of times, get excluded from the conversation when the homeless conversation is lifted. We do forget that there are a significant population of homeless youth, particularly in South Los Angeles. So I do think that the work is getting done, but definitely there's more work to get done. And this is why we wanted to start this series to support individuals that are interested or wanting to learn more about affordable housing and how affordable housing development actually work in communities. It's not necessarily about just the production of units, but also the production of services and how we look at uplifting and building the community. I see now, Angela, that there are a few questions that went up. I think one question from Maria, I think maybe targeted towards Tunua, around just explaining when you mentioned LLCs coming in and what an LLC is and what that significance is.
That's a good point, and thanks for catching that, Maria. So it's a limited liability corporation. It's a designation of a kind of business. So, a lot of because we have such a housing shortage in our market, it's, really important and great when families, everyday people who are working in these jobs that we talked about and that we all might have, are able to purchase housing. But in the case of the study that UCLA recently put out, what they were finding is that certain neighborhoods like South LA were targeted by major companies who were coming in and who formed in the form of LLCs and purchasing local single family homes. And what happens then is that you've got sort of a larger sort of company that owns blocks or several single family homes in a neighborhood, making it much harder for the community there to be able to make those purchases and grow the kind of equity and stability that families are looking for.
Thank you, Tunua. And yes, you're right. We deal with that a lot with the speculative market, or where you have LLCs that are purchasing a lot of the property, both single family and duplexes and quads and fourplexes primarily, but also commercial properties that we tend to target for affordable housing. So it's part of the additional challenges in trying to produce more affordable housing in the community. And a lot of times, I know this topic, this series is not necessarily about gentrification, but when we speak of gentrification, people tend to forget that it occurs at the purchase of dirt, not necessarily when a Starbucks or a new fancy discount store or something pops up in the neighborhood. Is actually when dirt transfer, and dirt is a term for when real estate transfer. And in South Los Angeles, just because you don't see a for sale sign up doesn't mean that real estate is not being transferred or sold. And that's some of the challenges that we deal with when trying to, not only us, but others deal with when trying to source and produce affordable housing. And I don't know if Karen or Tunua may want to comment on that, but I just also want to make sure that if there's other questions, Angela, that folks want to ask the panel.
We did have a question come up in the Q&A box and this question comes from Saba at CSH. How can we address the systemic racial trauma Black people carry around engaging in business activities like tax returns and banking?
And I was gonna add, when Tunua, you were speaking to that, I run a nonprofit, obviously, and that's an issue with nonprofits as well. And one of the ideas that I've had is to have, a common back office for organizations. And that means to have an organization that could kind of function as the administrative hub for various activities. We've seen that exist. I worked for one and earlier in my career, Community Partners, but is there something like that to be developed in South LA for nonprofits, but also for small businesses to provide that kind of support?
So I can count on Saba to bring that kind of critical and right on thought and just uncovering what should have been obvious to so many of us, but is not. So Saba, thank you. It is, so here's an example of that trauma. And maybe you're thinking about this, maybe you're thinking about another example, but I've been studying this for some time to try and figure out what it is, Karen, what can we do to support and bring Black-owned small businesses into the place of having financial wherewithal, and what keeps them from doing that. And what we found with the PPP, and what I knew was true before then, but because of the way the PPP was set up, that particular program for small businesses, this left a lot of our businesses out as well. And the issue is, we as a community have determined that if we tell the government all that we're making as a business, that means that, we've got to pay higher taxes, we've got to report that, and the trauma of not having access and control over your financial sort of life because you've been denied access to quality opportunities and jobs. You're just afraid to let anybody or anything in or disrupt what you have been able to control in terms of a cash flow. And so we have a lot of businesses that are cash based, that don't do the kind of reporting that they need to in order to be able to grow. Because if you do that reporting, then you can get a larger loan, you can, do some other things. You can create the kind of equity that your business is probably providing for you. But for, a number of reasons that I would attribute to trauma, we have not been willing to do that. And so, Saba, this is something that, first of all, we have to call out. We have to call it out for what it is. We got to spend some more time studying this and trying to understand what keeps us from doing this. Why are we so uncomfortable with that? And in the meantime, the things that we've been able to do, or at least trying to do in our work, is break it down and make the steps so incremental and so easy to do that it doesn't feel like it's overwhelming. It doesn't feel like it's just a statement of get this in order, but it's a very incremental, small set of things that you can do a little bit at a time, and then over time you will get to where the goal is. So that's one. And then the other is, I think you're right, Karen, we just have to help. We got to connect people with folks who do this and do it well. So if you're not ready to, as a small business owner, to do this, and this comes from also our personal finances too. If you're not ready for that as a business, then let's try and figure out how do we get you connected with someone who does this on a regular basis, is going to be able to help you do it for you, because they are not having the same personal experience with the money, with the business in the same way that you are, so that it at least gets done. So those are two ways that for right now, but Saba, thanks for reminding us of that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, economic development, thinking about this kind of service in conjunction with economic development activities like Destination Crenshaw, for example. I mean, wouldn't it be interesting to have some kind of program alongside that initiative that was specifically focused on this issue? And it feels like there's a lot going on where that might be a fit.
We are, in fact, working with the Destination Crenshaw team on this vision right now.
Perfect.
Yes.
Love it.
So yes.
Yeah.
We've got some things brewing right now.
Oh, I love it. That is so perfect.
And I just have to talk also about Karen, partnerships as well. When CRCD first got started, I mean, we didn't have the bandwidth or financial capacity to do affordable housing, but good groups like, have to highlight my friends and family at Little Tokyo Service Center, stepped up big time.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to my brother, Dean Matsubiya.
I know.
Former board.
Yeah.
They really stepped up as a family at Little Tokyo to support a new group like CRCD in South LA, because they believed in the work that we were doing and we shared mission. But in the theory of what, in the spirit of what you were saying, we didn't have the capacity to do it, but there are groups that do. And there are partnership channels that can work, because at the end of the day, my friend Tunua is going to always ask me, what's your balance sheet looking like?
Right.
Can I see your financials? Where's your audit? So those things are a reality in doing this type of work as well. And people should know. But there are great groups out there like Little Tokyo, CRCD, and others that could create partnerships to put more housing into production, not only in South LA, but in other communities in LA. And I, because we can also talk about that as well, but I do want to go back to Angela, because I know there was a few questions that popped up in the queue.
Can I throw something in here right now?
Wait.
Go for it.
That's an interesting case study. just about this issue of lack of capital in a way. I don't know if you all heard about the development that's going on the Marlton Square property. I think that's where it is. I could be wrong. There's a property that is, I think it's around 600 units, and the local area planning commission turned this project down, and they went to, they took it up the chain in terms of a legal case. And there's a law called the California Accountability Act, or the Housing Accountability Act, that you have to have real justification for turning down a project like this, given our lack of affordable housing, or given our lack of housing in general. It's not necessarily just focused on affordable housing, but the South LA Area Planning Commission was appalled because this development didn't have affordable housing, and it was going in a prime location in South LA. And so, notwithstanding this law, they turned it down on the issue of equity. If you're going to build a project in South LA and not have affordable housing, what is that? That is gentrification, like writ large. And so, I think one of the challenges for us in South LA is the fact that we do not have access to the capital to be able to take these parcels that are significant in our community and transform them into, housing for the folks that live there right now. And so, Tunua, I don't know. I mean, how do we deal with this issue? Like, is there some opportunity to provide more access to capital, I guess?
Well, now is the moment, right?
Yeah.
Now is the moment. There is more capital that says it's trying to find Black people, Black entrepreneurs, and Black communities than ever. And it is the moment to be thinking about that. We missed our chance to pass Prop 16 in the sense that could, part of what we've lost over the last 25 years is we have a missing set of small businesses that should have been started by our generation that didn't get a chance to get started because there is so much rampant discrimination in being able to start and access the capital and be able to get the contracts that are needed to grow businesses. So that makes it hard when I start looking at, okay, so who are the Black developers in our community? And we just have so few.
Right.
And that's because there hasn't been, we would have to have a mandate that said that if you're going to build, if you're going to put out a contract, it has to have X percentage, not just of Black people working, but Black people owning part of that contract.
Right.
And that's not there. There are a couple of things that we're doing at LISC right now, so that we do have something that we just launched called the Black Economic Development Fund. That is capital that says that it's looking for, again, Black institutions, Black businesses, and Black communities. And it is going to be focused on undergirding our Black-owned banks, as well as Black-led community development financial institutions and Black anchor institutions. So your historically Black colleges or institutions that either are located in or primarily serve Black communities. So there's that opportunity. We just announced through our National Equity Fund an emphasis on equity opportunities for Black and Brown developers who are looking to develop affordable housing. And so we're going to be looking for private sector, in particular, Black and Brown folks who are ready to do development, but don't have the equity on their balance sheet in order to get that done. So that's another place. And then we are nationally looking at a project called Project 10X. And we have, we know what everybody else knows is that Black wealth is 10 times less than that of the average white family. And so Project 10X is about the fact that you not only have to invest economically, you have to invest in health, you have to invest in housing, you have to invest in other sort of quality of life experiences so that people aren't dying faster in Black communities. And our goal is to be able to raise the kind of capital that would be needed to funnel into CRCD, to put into you, Karen, and the work that you're doing in Destination Crenshaw, so that we can have the stated outcome of tackling the racial wealth gap and bringing Project 10X to a point where it's not 10. Let's get it to 5. Of course, I want to eliminate it. But we've got to do even more to get there. And
well,
so,
oh, sorry.
I was just going to say this kind of thinking, we can move as well on the local level and start to create our own local initiatives that look like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that holistic approach is really what's needed. And that's, what I'm thinking about. One of the things that happened on the Planning Commission recently is we formed an equity committee, and I'm chairing that. And just thinking about, the transit-oriented communities developments. I don't know if people know what that is, but there's a policy, and this came out of Measure JJJ, where if a development is within, I think it's 2,500 feet of a major transit stop, then you are given, various options by right, because like you get extra height, or you get extra, you can have less of a setback, et cetera, et cetera. And, these are great in some ways because it pushes the development of, these sprinkling of units of affordable housing. But as my colleague Faisal Roble, who is the Chief Equity Officer now in the Planning Department, which is amazing that we have that, says, like in a Black community, if you, put a huge development next to a house, then you've impacted that family's wealth, because often in the Black community, that's where wealth is held, in property as opposed to, in the bank. And so, why would you apply something like TOC the same in every neighborhood, as opposed to, doing what you're talking about, Tunua, which is really looking at the issue of Black people and the challenge, and not just Black people, brown people, everybody. What are the challenges for that community, and how do we tailor these policies to really, specifically promote opportunity in those communities? And I think that is the challenge. We've always talked about disaggregation of data, and we really need to disaggregate the development process so that we're looking very specifically at what these needs are, and really applying our policy solutions very specifically to address that, lack of wealth that we see in these communities.
I so appreciate the conversation. It reminds me of a time I was on a panel with Tunua, and she mentioned how folks need to stop selling their parents' homes in the community, Black and brown particularly, because you're selling them.
That was in the house. We were in the family house when we were talking about it.
Yeah, it's true.
But I do, just want to make sure that Angela, is there other questions in the queue?
We do have a few questions. So we do have a few questions. So one question is really about partnerships. And there was a question from Rosa about whether CRCD works collaboratively with schools, law enforcement, DV programs, and programs that work with victims of human trafficking, teen pregnancy, and other local community action agencies to address the needs of the program participants. And I just want to add on to that, because I did answer yes. However, I would love for you all to kind of talk about this more, because there was also another question from folks at GRID asking just about how do we go about forming these kinds of partnerships to move this work forward. So I'll turn it back to you guys.
I will start off by, echoing Angela by saying, yes, CRCD is intentional about partnering, and we continue to recognize that we can't do all of the work, that the work of improving our neighborhood and accessing our folks accessing services, particularly young people, only happens with deliberate partnerships. I'm proud to say that we're, having found ourselves in force partnerships. They're all intentional because it's important that they're intentional because you have to recognize and want and expect quality services that you're referring a participant or particularly a young person to. And so, I'm proud to say that we're intentional about that. We continue to press the brakes at times and look at ways that we can improve that. By no means am I saying it's perfect, but I'm proud to say that we're intentional about making sure that our participants, residents, students, clients have access to reputable services. Tunua or Karen, not sure if you want to jump in on that question itself as far as partnerships or how partnerships are formed or what's some best practices out there potentially?
Well, I mean, partnerships are really essential to our work. For example, with the Heart of Hyde Park mural that we created, we partnered with HOPE, which is Hyde Park Organizing Partners in Empowerment, and then the local neighborhood council, as well as CD8 and Metro. And so, it is through these partnerships that we've been able to both implement our work, but also to grow. And I would say too, we are actually under the umbrella of community partners. So we're fiscally sponsored, and that has been a very important position for us to be in because, of the support we get in terms of all of our administrative activities. And, so between that partnership, as well as all of the partnerships that we have in the community, that's really contributed to our success. I will say that I agree with Mark in terms of this match of values and, sort of the, a similar way of seeing things as being really important. It doesn't work when when there isn't that alignment. So, that has to be really examined and the work done to consider whether it's a viable partnership. Now, that said, I could see some kind of back office situation where there's some administrative support without having a full-blown partnership. So like a service that, is set up by, the city or, LISC or, some other entity that, really provides these businesses and nonprofits with the administrative support they need to really survive. And when we were kind of early on in our history, and we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. I mean, it really, like people, when you're running a nonprofit, and I guess when you're running a business too, you think about like the money part, like the sales as being the most important part, but like I would say being able to not only get the money, but also to manage the money is as important. And, that is where I think a lot of our organizations are challenged. So to be able to provide that stewardship, guidance, and support and get access to that is extremely critical because it really is the ingredient for sustainability.
Not a lot to add there. We believe in partnerships, but I just put in the chat that match of values can't be underestimated. I have been in a partnership where we didn't have aligned values, and in that case, you either have to have a lead and a follower, because it'll be very difficult to really be in co-partnership in order to keep moving forward. But beyond that, the other thing is the partnership is about the conversations. Like Karen and Mark and I have been able to develop relationships over the years, and that makes for a much more workable partnership. Because there are going to be moments in the partnership where it's like, oh, do we have aligned values? I don't know, but at least I know I can call them and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? And I come to that conversation knowing that they have South LA and the work at the top of their mind and heart, and they know that I have that too. And with that understanding and that personal relationship, it at least makes for the harder places that you come to in the road of partnership that much more crossable.
Yeah.
And I would just add, especially when trying to build affordable housing, you definitely have. I mean, we've been through our series of partners, but Tunua and Karen are absolutely right. The value. I mean, it can be understated that values and respecting one's values is extremely important. It can't be a transactional relationship only, or rubber stamp, especially if you're doing community building. And that's why I tend to go back to our partnership with Little Tokyo, because they valued our mission. They valued us as a partner. They brought our team in to help us build capacity. And not everyone is always open to all of those things. But I think it made for a better CRCD and made for a better South LA for the work that we're doing. So when seeking partnerships, like Tunua mentioned and Karen, it's really about relationships and being able to understand that in every relationship, things are not always perfect, but at least you want to be able to have a conversation about it. And that takes that partnership to new levels. And I can't understate the value of partnerships with CRCD. It's in fact part of how we've been able to do our work. But also in any relationship, you got to work on your partnership too. It's just not automatic. You got to work at it. You gotta put in the work that you want to see grow and come out of those partnerships. People don't partner just to partner. And for those that do, those partnerships don't work out as well as you would like. But for people that are really working at it and working towards that, building that partnership, magical things happen. Like building housing and delivering quality services. So I'll stop there again, Angela. I don't know if there's other additional.
I can just add something too.
Yeah,
I want to just really commend Little Tokyo in general, because in Leimert Park there's a real interest in kind of community land control, and the folks in Little Tokyo have been very successful at that, in terms of acts, and this is specifically around city-owned land. And so they've been so generous to, come to Leimert Park and have a dialogue about, sharing their wisdom in terms of, thinking about, the various developments, including the Budokan, which is the most recent one. I just really think that that's an interesting model to really think about in general, this cross neighborhood, kind of sharing that I think Tunua, you and I have talked about doing that at some point, but that's an interesting opportunity to maybe think about is, how can neighborhoods and organizations learn from each other and mentor each other in, you know, this forward movement.
Then COVID hit.
Yeah, right.
So, Mark, are you gonna wrap us up? I want to make sure because I'm gonna. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Angela, I just want to make sure before we get to wrap up that if there's any other questions, because actually Angela is, I believe, going to wrap us up, but just wanted to make sure that if there's any other questions in the queue or.
Yeah, there's one more question coming from Saba, and maybe this is also it kind of ties back to some of what was being talked about earlier. So as an artist too, I so appreciate the work that you are doing, Karen. During the quarantine, it's interesting how art has been saving us. Films, TV, and adult coloring books are some examples. Is this an opportunity right now, and with Black Lives Matter, as a way to mobilize more investment in Black and Brown artists and communities?
It's so interesting that you mentioned that. I love it. So I think so. And we actually have an initiative, and I'm going to put the website in the chat. It's called Creating Our Next LA. And we are really focused on having artists and young people lead community conversations around to gather stories from the community about their experiences, about their vision for moving South Los Angeles forward after, you know, in a post-crisis reality. Recognizing that, you know, we know communities know what they need. And so often the problem is that communities don't get what they know what they need. They get what, you know, whoever's giving thinks they need. And so we want to provide the opportunity with this creative leadership of artists and youth for the communities to really imagine their future and then to have that realized artistically by these artistic teams that can then be the foundation for advocacy to actually move forward the community's agenda, not the agenda of anybody else, but the community's agenda. So we're really excited about this opportunity for the arts to play a role in this re-envisioning of the community broadly, but also in terms of, you know, how the arts can continue to move the community forward, to support the community in moving forward. So I'm going to invite all of you to join us in this initiative.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. And I just want to let everyone know that Tunua had to step off, but you know, definitely appreciated you, Karen, and Angela and team for the opportunity she had in being on this panel, and wanted me to express to everyone to please look at the website that Angela put in the chat for LISC, as she's, her and her staff is open and willing to assist more in fielding questions or just exploring opportunities to help bring resources into South Los Angeles, but LA in general, whether it's small business or helping to bring more affordable housing or permanent supportive housing to our community. So just wanted to mention that. Sorry, Angela, I know you said it was a couple questions, so I didn't want to.
No, that was the last question.
Okay.
So you're good. I think at this time, if you all have any parting words for the participants, for all our attendees today, anything that particularly maybe resonated with you or through this conversation, and then once you guys share your parting words, we'll just do a closeout.
Karen?
You know, again, I want to say how grateful I have been to be a part of this conversation with these two amazing leaders, and really, you know, believe strongly. One of the statistics that I heard today in the Planning Commission was that 75% of Los Angeles is zoned single family. So what that means is that, you know, everyone has a role to play in dealing with this affordable housing issue. And so, you know, that is kind of underscored or related to this idea of community empowerment and really getting the community involved in this conversation about how it is that we make sure that everybody is housed. I mean, CRCD is doing an incredible job in terms of, you know, adding to our affordable housing stock. But the need is huge. It's incredible how many units of housing we need to be able to address the issue. And as I said, it's growing. So, you know, coming together to come up with strategies to involve everybody in the problem solving is, I think, the way that this issue is actually going to get solved. So, you know, and, you know, taking inspiration from what CRC is doing in that process, I think is the way to go.
Thank you, Karen and Tunua, if she was on, for again allowing me and us to share the stage with you and hear about the powerful work that you're doing in Los Angeles, but particularly in South Los Angeles. I do want to take a moment to thank, not sure who's online, but just want to thank Angela and Lisa and our CRCD team, particularly our supportive services team, who provides supportive services in housing and supportive services. Angela, I got that right, I believe. Team who day in and day out work, you know, tirelessly to provide wraparound support services for young people and individuals that reside in permanent supportive housing that we operate. I believe Dr. Lynette Jenkins is on, and some of her team. Just want to tip my hat and thank you all for the work that you all are doing, so that we're able to demonstrate how this work is done in the community. And I can't emphasize that, I don't think I touched on, but neighborhood-based community development work is important. And if you're thinking about partnering in neighborhoods, make no assumptions about those neighborhoods. There are groups in those neighborhoods, rather large, small, or in between, that have been doing work in those neighborhoods, and make it a purpose and be intentional about reaching out to those groups to understand those communities, not just make assumptions, and form deliberate partnerships that actually work in building those communities. Not just look at areas for the opportunity to build units per se, but again, to look at opportunities to expand your capacity to do that type of work, but also to build community. It's not just about the units, it's also about the person that's going to be living in that unit and the person that's going to be experiencing that community. And it's important that in doing this work in building affordable housing, that we continue to have the lens on of building the community as well. It's magic that happens when a new building goes up in the neighborhood. I'll take the moment to invite you all to check out our virtual ribbon cutting ceremony for residents on Main, a project located at the corner of 69th and Main. And many people don't know, but historically, for almost 3 decades or more, I was reminded yesterday, it was over 30 years, that the community had to deal with blight, crime, and other activity that you know, plagued that particular corner in that neighborhood for decades. It's across the street from Bethune Middle School. And even when it was called junior high school, there were problems at that corner. And now we're building, in partnership with LA Family Housing, a beautiful building that's going to provide housing for formerly homeless youth and families, and there's going to be wraparound support services. So if you're looking for a tangible example, not only of the projects that we've displayed, but there's a new project coming into South Los Angeles that's being built at the corner of 69th and Main, or opening at 69th and Main. And then CRCD is also building 2 additional projects at the corner of 67th and 68th and Main, doing our part in partnership with reputable organizations to bring more housing to support homeless youth and families in South Los Angeles. But again, this work cannot be done alone. There's partners, and we have a wonderful staff team that puts it all together. So Angela, just want to take this time to just thank them. I know I went over time, but I just want to make sure that I give kudos to our team.
You're good on time, Mark. Thank you. And props to our learning and evaluation team for putting together the data for the PowerPoint that you shared earlier. The video of this workshop will be posted on CRCD's YouTube channel. Everyone who is on the line today will receive an email with that link, as well as a link for a quick evaluation survey to let us know how we did and anything that we could do to improve for the upcoming convenings. We have 4 more sessions left, and actually the next one will be in February, and we'll take a deeper dive into partnerships specifically for developing permanent supportive housing. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Big ups and props to our panelists, Karen, Mark, Tunua. You guys are always amazing, and I love hearing the discussions that you all have. Thank you for giving us a peek into, letting us peek into this wonderful discussion, and we hope that folks will join us in February. So thank you.
Thank you,
Have
guys.
a great day, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Right.